The Galactic Council had watched Earth for a very long time. For almost 800 years, their observation satellites had floated silently around the small blue planet, recording everything. They watched humans discover fire. They watched humans build cities. They watched humans fight wars over pieces of land smaller than most council parking lots. And after all that watching, the council had made a decision. Humans were not worth talking to. The official classification was pre-spacefaring nuisance species. This meant that humans were too primitive and too crazy to bother with. The council had 47 member species, and all of them agreed on this point. Humans were loud. Humans were violent. Humans put pineapple on pizza, which the Valorian theocracy considered a crime against the universe itself. So when 3 human ships suddenly appeared at the edge of council space on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the galaxy was not prepared. High Chancellor Vextarian was in his private chambers when the alarm reached him. He was an ancient being, 8 feet tall, with a body made of living crystal that shifted colors with his mood. Right now, he was shifting from calm blue to confused purple. He had led the Galactic Council for 3,000 years. He had negotiated peace between species that breathed fire and species that were made of water. He had prevented 12 galaxy-wide wars. Nothing surprised him anymore until today. "What do you mean, human ships?" he asked his assistant. His assistant, a small furry creature named Bix, was trembling. "3 of them, High Chancellor. They just appeared. No warning, no communication. They are just sitting there." Vextharian walked to his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3 impossible ships were floating in space. Ships built by creatures who, according to council records, had only figured out basic space travel 50 years ago. "Call an emergency session," he said. "All species." Now, the council chamber was the largest room in the known galaxy. It could hold representatives from 1,000 different worlds, and today it was full. The noise was incredible. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries were now arguing at the top of their lungs. Tentacles and breathing tubes, the insectoid Crixel demanded immediate action. Their ambassador, a 7-foot mantis creature with razor-sharp arms, was clicking his mandibles in fury. "We must quarantine them immediately. Humans are dangerous. Have you seen what they do to each other? They cannot be allowed to spread." The gaseous nebulans, who existed as clouds of thinking mist, floated near the ceiling and suggested that perhaps the ships were not real. "Maybe it is a group hallucination," their representative whispered. "Humans cannot possibly have reached us. Our calculations said they needed another 200 years. The Draxian warchief laughed at both of them. The Draxians were a warrior species, 7-foot reptiles covered in scales and scars. They had conquered 12 star systems before joining the council, and they were afraid of nothing. "Let us handle it," the warchief said, showing all 3 rows of his teeth. "We will send a welcome party. If they are friendly, good. If not, we will destroy them." Simple. It seemed like a reasonable plan until the Draxian scouts sent back their report. The room went silent as the images appeared on the main screen. 3 ships floated in the darkness of space. The first was a cargo freighter that looked like it had been welded together from spare parts. Its name, painted in fading letters on the side, was the Rusty Bucket. The second ship was sleek and covered in scientific equipment. This was Curiosity's Revenge, a research vessel from something called MIT, which the council's translators could not properly decode. The third ship made everyone uncomfortable. It was a disaster of metal and wire, the parts sticking out at odd angles and what appeared to be a swimming pool attached to the side. Its name was Hold My Beer. But the ships themselves were not the problem. The problem was what the scouts found attached to the ships. "Are those nuclear weapons?" the Crixel ambassador asked, his voice very small. They were. The humans had strapped nuclear warheads to their ships. Not as weapons, apparently, but as a backup power source. The scout report noted that the humans had labeled them emergency generators and had placed warning stickers on them that said, "Do not touch with a small" smiley face. The Draxian warchief was no longer laughing. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should try talking to them first." High Chancellor Vextharian agreed. He ordered a communication channel open to the human vessels. The entire council held its breath as the connection was established. Every eye, tentacle, and sensory organ in the room was focused on the screen. The face that appeared was not what anyone expected. It was a human female, older, with gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was wearing a shirt that said "World's Okayest Grandma" and was holding a cup of something that steamed. Behind her, someone was playing loud music, and another human was chasing what appeared to be a small animal across the background. "Hello?" the human said, squinting at the screen. "Is this thing working?" "Jenkins, turn down that music." "Sorry about that. Can you hear me?" Vextharian's crystal body shifted to a color that no one in the council had ever seen before. It was the color of complete confusion. "Yes," he managed. "We can hear you. I am High Chancellor Vextharian of the Galactic Council. You have entered council space. Please identify yourself." The human took a sip from her cup. "Oh, neat. Aliens. I told my daughter aliens were real, but she never believed me. Hang on, let me get this down." She turned away from the screen. "Marcus, get in here. There's a giant crystal man on the phone." The council watched in stunned silence as more humans crowded around the screen, pushing each other and pointing. "I am Ambassador." "Actually, hold on." The gray-haired woman looked at the others. "Am I the ambassador? Is that how this works?" "I just answered because nobody else wanted to." "Sure, Alina. You're the ambassador now," someone said off-screen. "Okay then." The woman, now known as Ambassador Alina, turned back to the screen. "I am Ambassador Alina Vasquez of Earth, representing all of humanity, I guess." "Nice to meet you." High Chancellor Vexarian had prepared a formal speech. He had practiced the ancient words of first contact that the council had used for 10,000 years. But looking at this human in her grandmother's shirt holding her steaming cup, he could not remember any of them. "Welcome to council space," he said finally. "We have much to discuss." Ambassador Vasquez nodded seriously. Then she looked around the massive council chamber that was visible behind Vexavarian. Her eyes went wide at the thousands of alien species, the floating platforms, the technology beyond human imagination. "Wow," she said. "This is incredible. Really beautiful. Quick question, though." She leaned closer to the screen. "Is there parking validation, or do we need to pay for a spot somewhere?" The translation systems worked perfectly. Every species in the council heard her words clearly, and not a single one of them knew what parking validation meant. High Chancellor Vextharian turned to his assistant. "Bix," he said quietly, "find out what parking validation is." Bix ran to the translation department. The translation department contacted the linguistics division. The linguistics division consulted the cultural analysis team. 4 hours later, they were still arguing about whether it was a religious ritual or a form of currency. Meanwhile, Ambassador Elena Vasquez waited patiently on the screen, occasionally waving at different alien species who stared at her. At one point, she made the Crixel ambassador laugh by pretending to have claws like him. No one had ever made a Crixel laugh before. The sound was terrifying. The galaxy would never be the same. The council decided that a formal, diplomatic reception was necessary. This was standard procedure for all new species entering council space. The reception would allow the council to assess humanity's culture, intentions, and threat level. It was a tradition that had worked perfectly for 10,000 years. It was about to fail spectacularly. The reception hall was designed to impress and intimidate. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls displayed holographic images of the council's greatest achievements, peace treaties that ended centuries of war, scientific discoveries that changed the universe, monuments built on 1,000 different worlds. In the center of the room stood a table filled with delicacies from all 47 member species, each dish carefully chosen to represent its culture's finest cuisine. Ambassador Elena Vasquez arrived wearing a dress she had borrowed from the Curiosity's Revenge science team. It was slightly too big for her and had a small coffee stain on the sleeve that she had tried to cover with a brooch. Behind her walked her diplomatic team. which had been assembled in approximately 15 minutes with no planning whatsoever, Captain. Amara Okonkwo was a Nigerian astrophysicist who had spent 20 years studying stars. She was brilliant, focused, and completely unable to pay attention to anything except the Council's star charts, which she had spotted immediately upon entering. The charts were three-dimensional, floating in the air and absolutely beautiful. They were also, she noticed with growing horror, wrong. The Council had been using incorrect calculations for their spiral arm measurements. She wanted to tell someone, but she also did not want to start an intergalactic incident in the first 5 minutes. Dr. Minji Park was a Korean biologist who had dedicated her life to studying alien ecosystems. Now she was surrounded by actual aliens, and she could not contain her excitement. Every species she saw made her want to ask questions. How did the crystalline beings reproduce? What did the gas creatures eat? How often did the insectoid Crixel molt their exoskeletons? She had a notebook ready and was writing observations as fast as she could. And then there was Jenkins. Nobody knew Jenkins's first name. Nobody knew how Jenkins had gotten on the diplomatic team. Nobody remembered inviting him. He was 23 years old. Had graduated from college 6 months ago with a degree in communications, and had somehow acquired 3 alien pets within the first hour of arriving at the reception. One of them was a small, floating ball of light that followed him everywhere. Another was a 6-legged creature that sat on his shoulder and made purring sounds. The third was technically classified as a dangerous predator by the Draxian Empire, but it seemed to like Jenkins and kept nuzzling his hand. Hi. Wait, Chancellor Vextarian watched the humans enter and felt his crystal body shift to worried orange. The other council members were gathering around, studying the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Everything needed to go perfectly. It did not. The first disaster happened within 10 minutes. Ambassador Vasquez was walking along the food table, admiring the various dishes, when she spotted a bowl filled with small purple fruits. They looked delicious. They smelled amazing. She picked one up and ate it. The Valorian priest admiral, who had been standing nearby, made a sound that no translator could interpret. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the floor. Ambassador Vasquez stood frozen with the fruit in her hand. What happened? Is he okay? Did I do something? A junior Valorian diplomat rushed over, his face pale. That fruit, he whispered, is the sacred symbol of our theocracy. It represents the birth of our gods. We do not eat it. We worship it. There was a long moment of silence. It's really good, though, Dr. Park said helpfully. Having eaten 3 of them while no one was looking, Captain Okonkwo, still distracted by the star charts, suggested that the fruit's biochemical composition meant it was basically just a fancy grape, which did not help the situation at all. Medical teams carried the unconscious priest admiral away. Ambassador Vasquez apologized 17 times. The Valorian delegation decided to forgive the humans because, as they admitted privately, the fruits were delicious. They had always secretly wanted to try one, but the night was far from over. The Draxion. War Chief had been watching the humans carefully. His name was Krexvathan, and he had earned his position by defeating 100 enemies in single combat. He was not impressed by these soft, squishy creatures who ate sacred fruits by accident. He decided to establish dominance. In Draxian culture, dominance was established through a traditional display. The war chief would approach the target, spread his arms wide, raise his head, and roar as loudly as possible. The target was supposed to lower their eyes and back away, acknowledging the Draxian superiority. War Chief Krexvathan approached Jenkins, who seemed to be the youngest and weakest of the humans. He spread his 7-foot arms. He raised his massive head. He opened his mouth and released a roar that shook the walls and made several smaller species run for cover. Jenkins, who had not been paying attention, looked up at the last second and saw a giant reptile with his arms spread wide. His brain, working on pure instinct, interpreted this as only one thing. "Hey, big guy," Jenkins said cheerfully. He raised his hand and slapped it against the war chief's open palm. Up high. The sound of the high five echoed through the silent hall. War Chief Krexvathan froze. In his entire life, no one had ever touched him with affection. His species showed dominance through combat and submission through distance. Physical contact that was not violent was unknown to them. And yet this small, soft human had just touched his hand and smiled at him. Something strange happened in the war chief's chest. It felt warm. It felt confusing. His eyes began to water. "I need to leave," he said, his voice cracking. He turned and walked quickly toward the exit. Several Draxian warriors tried to follow him, but he waved them away. He needed to be alone. He needed to understand these strange feelings. He needed to cry. Ambassador Vasquez watched him go. "Did we do something wrong again?" The Draxian second in command shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I think you did something very right. We will need to discuss this high-fave technology in great detail." Meanwhile, Dr. Park had cornered the Crixel ambassador and was asking him questions about his molting cycle. The Crixel, whose species was usually avoided because others found their biological processes disgusting, was shocked to find a human who was genuinely interested. "You shed your entire exoskeleton at once?" Dr. Park asked, writing furiously in her notebook. "That's amazing. How long does it take? Does it hurt? Can I see your old shells?" The Crixel ambassador, who had not had a real conversation with another species in 50 years, found himself talking for hours. By the end of the night, he had promised to send Dr. Park a collection of his shed exoskeletons, which she declared was the best gift ever. Captain Okonkwo finally could not contain herself any longer. She marched up to the Nebulon delegation and pointed at the star charts. "Your calculations for the spiral arm are wrong," she said. "You've been using an outdated constant. Every map you've made for the last 600 years is slightly incorrect." The Nebulans, who prided themselves on perfect accuracy, were stunned. They checked her math. She was right. 600 years of cartography needed to be redone. Nobody thanked her. She did not care. She was already planning the corrections, as the reception finally ended. High Chancellor Vexterian stood alone in the empty hall. The humans had eaten sacred fruit. They had made the greatest warrior in the galaxy cry. They had insulted the Nebulan's mathematics. They had accumulated pets that were not supposed to be pets. And somehow, impossibly, everyone wanted to see them again. He did not understand humans at all. He was beginning to think that nobody ever would. The Council had a process for everything. It was how they had maintained peace across thousands of star systems for 10,000 years. Every new species had to prove their worth through a formal demonstration of technology and capability. This was not optional. This was tradition. Ambassador Alina Vasquez received the request on the morning after the reception. She read it 3 times, then gathered her team in the cargo hold of the Rusty Bucket, which was the only space large enough for all of them to meet. "They want us to demonstrate human achievement," she said. "Technology, science, culture, that sort of thing." Captain Okonkwo nodded. "We have some impressive technology. Quantum computing, fusion power, genetic engineering." Dr. Park agreed. "Our biological sciences have made remarkable progress. We could show them our medical advances." Jenkins was feeding his alien pets. "I could show them videos," he offered. Everyone ignored. Jenkins. The demonstration was scheduled for the following day in the Grand Exhibition Hall, a space specifically designed to showcase technological marvels. Previous demonstrations had included faster-than-light engines, planet-sized construction projects, and weapons capable of destroying stars. The council members took their seats with moderate expectations. Humans were primitive. This would probably be boring. Captain Okonkwo went first. She had prepared a presentation on human scientific achievements, complete with holographic displays borrowed from the Council's technology division. She started with fusion power. The Council was not impressed. "We have had fusion power for 12,000 years, the Nebulan representative said with a yawn, which sounded like a small thunderstorm. Captain Okonkwo moved on to quantum computing. "Primitive," the Crixel ambassador clicked. "Our hatchlings play with more advanced toys." She showed them genetic engineering, space stations, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. The council watched with polite disinterest. Everything she showed them, they had already invented thousands of years ago. Captain Okonkwo was beginning to sweat. Then she mentioned the moon landing. In 1969, she said, humans traveled from Earth to their moon and walked on its surface. This got a few interested looks. Space travel was not impressive by itself, but the date was unusual. Near technological level. In 1969, the Nebulan representative calculated, would have been roughly equivalent to our Stone Age. How did you achieve space travel with such primitive technology? Captain Okonkwo smiled. This was her favorite part of human history. We did it with math, aluminum foil, and what our species calls sheer stubbornness. The spacecraft had less computing power than a modern calculator. The guidance systems were partially controlled by hand. We used explosive chemicals to push the ship into space. When problems arose, which happened constantly, our astronauts solved them by hitting things and hoping for the best. The room was very quiet. The entire journey took 3 days each way, she continued. The astronauts had no room to move. They ate food from plastic bags. They used bags for toilet purposes as well. And when they landed on the moon, they planted a flag and hit golf balls, because humans thought that would be funny. The Crixel ambassador was doing math on his personal device. His compound eyes widened. The risk calculations, he whispered. The probability of death was almost 90%. And they did this voluntarily? We did it 12 times, Captain, Okonkwo said. Just to make sure we could. The Crixel ambassador put down his device and stared at nothing. He was having what humans would call an existential crisis. His species calculated risk to the 15th decimal point before making any decision. Humans had flown to the moon in a metal box powered by explosions and held together with hope. Dr. Park's presentation came next. And it was somehow worse. She began with human biology, which she explained with great enthusiasm and no awareness of how her audience was reacting. Humans, she told them, were persistence predators. This meant they did not catch their prey with speed or strength or claws. Instead, they simply followed their prey for hours, sometimes days, till the animal became so exhausted that it collapsed. The Nebulan representative turned a shade of gray that indicated extreme distress. You chase animals until they die of exhaustion? How is that possible? How do you not become tired? Oh, we get tired, Dr. Park said cheerfully. We just ignore it. Humans are very good at ignoring pain and exhaustion when we want something. It's one of our best features. The Valorian priest admiral, who had just recovered from fainting at the reception, fainted again. His species had evolved from prey animals. The idea of a predator that never stopped chasing was his worst nightmare made. Real. Dr. Park continued with more biological facts. Humans could survive the loss of several major organs. Humans could heal broken bones. Humans could function without sleep for days if necessary, though they became increasingly unstable. Humans had tamed wolves, which were apex predators, by being friendly to them, until the wolves decided that living with humans was easier than hunting. You domesticated apex predators through friendship? The Draxian second-in-command asked. He sounded impressed and terrified. We also domesticated horses by sitting on them until they gave up, Dr. Park added, and cows by feeding them, and bees by stealing their homes. Humans are very good at making other species do what we want. Several council members were now actively taking notes. Others were contacting their home worlds with urgent messages. And then Jenkins took the stage. Nobody had told Jenkins what to present. Nobody had approved his materials. Nobody had even checked whether he was supposed to participate. But when his turn came, he walked confidently to the display console and connected his personal device. I'm going to show you human entertainment, he said. This is how we have fun. The 2-hour compilation of fail videos began to play. The council watched in mounting horror as humans fell off roofs. They watched humans crash vehicles into pools. They watched humans light fireworks indoors, swing from ropes that were not properly secured, and attempt backflips on concrete surfaces. They watched humans say, "Watch this and hold my beer." Before attempting activities that clearly should not be attempted, a human on screen set himself on fire. ran around screaming, and then jumped into a lake. He emerged, laughing. "Is he dead?" the Crixel ambassador asked. "No, he's fine," Jenkins said. "He did it again the next week." A human drove a small vehicle off a ramp, flew through the air, crashed into a pile of hay, and stood up cheering. "Why would anyone do this?" a Nebulan representative asked. "For fun," Jenkins said. "Also, internet points." The council did not know what internet points were. They added it to the growing list of human concepts that needed investigation. By the end of the video, 17 species had filed formal requests for clarification on whether humans were suicidal or indestructible. The official answer from the human delegation was yes. High Chancellor Vexarian called a recess. He stood at the window of his private chambers, watching the stars and trying to process what he had learned. Humans chased animals to death. Humans flew to moons in metal boxes. Humans set themselves on fire for entertainment. And somehow, impossibly, they were still alive. Not just alive, but thriving. Their species had spread across their planet, tamed their world, and now reached for the stars. He had led the council for 3,000 years. He had met hundreds of species. He had never met anything like humans. "Bix," he said to his assistant, "I need you to do something for me." "Yes, High Chancellor." "Find out everything you can about the phrase 'hold my beer.' I believe it may be the key to understanding their entire species." Bix hurried away to begin. Research that would eventually fill 300 pages and still reach no solid conclusions. The demonstration was over. The council was not sure what they had learned. They were sure, however, that humans were not boring. The council convened 3 days after the demonstration to vote on humanity's official status. The debate was fierce and showed no signs of ending. The Crixel delegation wanted quarantine. Their ambassador, still recovering from his existential crisis about the moon landing, argued that humans were too dangerous to allow free movement through council space. "They chase prey until it dies of exhaustion," he reminded everyone. "They fly to moons in explosive metal boxes. They set themselves on fire for fun. What will they do when they have access to real technology?" The Draxian delegation wanted immediate alliance. War Chief Krexvathan, who had spent 3 days thinking about the High Five, believed that humans were kindred spirits. "They are warriors," he said. "Chaotic and strange, yes, but brave. The galaxy needs more species willing to take risks." The Nebulans wanted everyone to calm down and think carefully. Their representative floated near the ceiling, occasionally pulsing with different colors to indicate various emotional states. "Perhaps we are overreacting. Humans are unusual, certainly, but they seem harmless. Mostly usually." Ambassador Vasquez sat in the observer section with her team, watching the debate with growing boredom. They had been arguing for 6 hours. Jenkins had fallen asleep. Dr. Park was reading research papers on her tablet. Captain Okonkwo was secretly working on her star chart corrections. "High Chancellor." Vextharian was about to call for the final vote when the alarms began. The sound was unlike anything the humans had heard before. It filled the entire council station with a deep, pulsing noise that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Warning lights flashed red across every surface. Council members who had been arguing moments ago were now standing in shocked silence. "What's happening?" Ambassador Vasquez asked, suddenly very awake. A tactical display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the council station surrounded by ships. 40 warships, arranged in a tight formation, all pointing their weapons at the station. High Chancellor Vextharian's crystal body turned a deep, angry red. "The Vrexnar," he said. The Vrexnar were pirates. They had terrorized the outer systems for decades, raiding cargo ships, attacking colonies, and disappearing before the Council's defense fleet could respond. They were organized, brutal, and completely without honor. And now, somehow, they had found their way to the Council station itself. A communication request appeared on the main screen. Vexasarian accepted it, and the face of the Vrexanar leader appeared. He was a massive creature with gray skin, 4 eyes, and a mouthful of teeth that seemed designed for tearing flesh. His name was Gorthok, and he was smiling. "High Chancellor," Gorthok said. "What an honor." Your defense fleet is 2 days away. Your weapons are powered down. You have no escape. I suggest you surrender immediately and save us all some time. Vexitherian's voice was cold. What do you want, Gorthok? Everything. Your technology, your resources, your most valuable prisoners. The Council has been a thorn in our side for too long. Today, that ends. Ambassador Vasquez had been watching quietly, but now she leaned forward. Excuse me, she said. Quick question. These are the bad guys, right? Every eye in the chamber turned to look at her. Yes, Vexitherian said slowly. These are very much the bad guys, Ambassador Vasquez smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a grandmother who had just been told that someone was threatening her family. She turned to her team. All right, kids, she said. Let's show them what stupid looks like. Captain Okonkwo was already moving. I need access to the station's navigation systems, she said. And someone get me those incorrect star charts. I have an idea. Dr. Park pulled out her tablet. The research drones on Curiosity's revenge. I've been modifying them for biological sample collection. They could also be modified for other purposes. Jenkins woke up. His alien pets, sensing his excitement, began making aggressive sounds. The station's maintenance AI, he said. I made friends with it during the reception. It's been really bored. I think it wants to help. The council members watched in confusion as the humans scattered in different directions, each moving with sudden purpose. Ambassador Vasquez remained in the chamber, watching the tactical display. Hi, Chancellor, she said. With your permission, humanity would like to handle this situation. Vexitherian hesitated. The humans had 3 ships. The Vrexenar had 40. The math did not work, but then he remembered the moon landing. He remembered the persistence predators. He remembered the fail videos and the humans who got up laughing after setting themselves on fire. Permission granted, he said. The next 11 minutes would become legendary. The Hold My Beer launched first. The engineering students had spent 3 years building that ship, and they had made certain decisions that would horrify any sane engineer. The weapons they had installed were not technically illegal because no civilized species had ever been crazy enough to invent them. Plasma lances that could cut through shields. Magnetic cannons that fired chunks of asteroids. A device that Jenkins had helped design, which was simply labeled the Big Oops. The Vrexenar commander laughed when he saw the single ship approaching. 1 vessel? Against 40? Humans truly are as stupid as the report suggested. Then the Big Oops activated. No one was ever quite sure what the Big Oops actually did. The official explanation involved quantum fields and gravitational manipulation. But most scientists suspected the engineering students had simply connected several dangerous things together and hoped for the best. The effect was immediate and spectacular. 6 Vrexenar ships suddenly found their weapon systems completely inverted. When they tried to fire at the Hold My Beer, they shot themselves instead. The Rusty Bucket entered the battle next. Captain Chen, who had piloted the cargo freighter for 40 years and knew every smuggling trick in the galaxy. The previous owner had installed military-grade engines, the kind usually reserved for interceptor ships. For tax reasons, the Rusty Bucket accelerated to speeds that should have torn it apart and began weaving between the Vrexenar vessels. Drawing their fire away from the station, Dr. Park launched her modified research drones from Curiosity's Revenge. They had been designed to collect biological samples. She had reprogrammed them to collect something else, the coolant lines that kept Vrexenar engines from overheating. The drones swarmed the enemy ships, cutting and slicing with precision tools never meant for combat. Within minutes, 7 more ships were drifting helplessly as their engines shut down. Captain, Okonkwo's voice came over the communication system. She had calculated an attack vector that the Council's tactical computers had immediately rejected as mathematically impossible and probably suicidal. She ignored the computers. Using her corrected star charts and a few calculations done in her head, she guided the Hold My Beer through the Vrexenar formation in a pattern that made no logical sense. The enemy ships tried to track the vessel and ended up shooting each other, and then there was Jenkins. Jenkins had spent the reception making friends with everyone, including the station's maintenance AI. a sophisticated system that controlled everything from air recycling to waste disposal. The AI had been designed for boring tasks and had developed something like depression over the centuries. Jenkins had talked to it, complimented its work, and promised to visit again. Now the AI was helping. Airlocks on the station opened and closed in rapid sequence, creating bursts of atmosphere that threw off the Vrexenar targeting systems. Lights flickered in patterns that confused their sensors. The station's garbage disposal system launched several tons of waste directly at the enemy flagship's bridge windows. It was not dangerous, but it was very distracting. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 14 Vrexenar ships had been destroyed. 20 had been disabled. 6 had fled into deep space, carrying stories of the insane humans who fought like they did not care about death. The Hold My Beer was on fire. Its crew considered this normal and did not seem concerned. Gorthok's flagship was drifting helplessly, its engines dead, its weapons destroyed. Captain Okonkwo had calculated the exact point where a well-placed asteroid chunk would disable the ship without killing the crew. She believed in precision. Ambassador Vasquez opened a communication channel to the flagship. "Hi there," she said. "Want to surrender now? Or should we demonstrate more human problem-solving?" Gorthak surrendered. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting, cheering, or simply staring in disbelief. The Draxian war chief was weeping openly, which was apparently a great honor in his culture. The Crixel ambassador was recalculating everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. High Chancellor Vexitharian stood at his podium, watching the humans celebrate their impossible victory. His crystal body had shifted through every color in his emotional range, and had finally settled on a shade he did not recognize. "It might have been hope, I believe," he said quietly. "The vote on humanity's status will not be necessary," the council agreed. The aftermath of the battle changed everything. For 3,000 years, High Chancellor Vexitarian had maintained a reputation for calm dignity. He had negotiated with conquerors without raising his voice. He had faced extinction-level threats without showing fear. He had led the Galactic Council through every crisis with the same measured, professional demeanor that had made him legend. So when he walked across the council chamber, wrapped his crystalline arms around Ambassador Alina Vasquez, and hugged her in front of the entire assembled galaxy, people noticed the image was broadcast across 1,000 star systems within minutes. It became the most shared recording in galactic history. Artists painted it. Poets wrote about it. The Draxians had it tattooed on their scales. A species of beings who communicated through interpretive dance spent 3 years creating a performance based on that single moment. Ambassador Vasquez, for her part, hugged him back and patted his crystal shoulder gently. There, she said. "It's okay. We're all friends now." The council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership. This had never happened before. Usually there were objections, delays, committees, and endless debates. But after watching 3 human ships defeat 40 Vrexenar warships in 11 minutes, nobody wanted to argue about paperwork. The vote was 37-0. With 10 abstentions from species who were still too confused to form opinions, Ambassador Vasquez accepted the membership on behalf of humanity, gave a short speech thanking everyone for not killing them, and then immediately began negotiating humanity's terms. "We want access to your technology," she said. "The good stuff, not the beginner kits." High Chancellor Vextharian agreed. "We want cultural exchange programs. Humans love meeting new people. We're social creatures." This was also agreed. "We want parking validation at all council facilities." There was a long pause. "We still do not know what parking validation is," Vextharian admitted. Ambassador Vasquez smiled. "Neither do I, honestly. But my husband always complained about parking costs, and I promised him I'd ask. He passed away 5 years ago, but I feel like I should follow through." The council agreed to parking validation, whatever it was. They created a department specifically to figure out what it meant and how to provide it. The department would eventually employ over 200 beings across 12 star systems and never reach a definitive conclusion. The celebration lasted for 3 days. War Chief Krexvathan found Jenkins in a quiet corner of the station, playing with his alien pets. The massive Draxian warrior approached slowly, which was difficult for someone who weighed 800 pounds and had never learned to be gentle. "Human Jenkins," he said formally. "I have thought much about our encounter at the reception. The high five you gave me changed something inside me. I do not fully understand it, but I know that I have never felt such connection with another being." Jenkins looked up and smiled. "That's awesome, big guy. High fives are great." The war chief knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the human. "In my culture, when a warrior finds someone who touches their soul, they form a bond that transcends normal friendship. I wish to make you my battle son. This would make you officially part of my clan with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Jenkins blinked. "Is that like being adopted?" "In a sense, you would be my heir. When I die, you would inherit my fleet, my title, and my seat on the Draxian High Council." Jenkins said. "Sure, why not?" And so Jenkins, a 23-year-old communications graduate who had accidentally joined a diplomatic mission, became the official heir to the greatest warrior empire in the outer systems. His alien pets were also given honorary titles. The floating ball of light became Sir Glausworth. Knight of the Eternal Flame, the six-legged purring creature became Baron Snuggles of the Northern Reaches. The dangerous predator became Princess Fluffernutter, which the Draxians struggled to pronounce but accepted anyway. Dr. Park established the first Interspecies Biology Institute 3 weeks after humanity's acceptance. It was located on a neutral station at the edge of Council space, and it attracted researchers from every member species. Her paper on human persistence predation became required reading at military academies across the galaxy. Generals who had conquered entire star systems studied the human ability to simply not give up. Philosophers wrote lengthy essays about the implications. The Crixel ambassador, who had finally recovered from his existential crisis, wrote the introduction. "Humans," he wrote, "do not understand the concept of impossible. They see obstacles as challenges. They see challenges as entertainment. They see death as an inconvenience to be avoided if convenient, but not a reason to stop trying. This makes them either the most inspiring or the most terrifying species in the galaxy, possibly both." Dr. Park also maintained her friendship with the Crixel ambassador. He sent her his shed exoskeletons as promised, and she displayed them proudly in her office. Other species found this strange and slightly disturbing. Dr. Park did not care. She thought why were beautiful. Captain Okonkwo corrected the Council's star charts. It took her 3 months of working 18-hour days, arguing with Nebulan mathematicians, and explaining basic concepts to beings who had traveled between stars for millennia. When she finished, the Council had accurate maps for the first time in 600 years. Nobody thanked her. The Nebulans were too embarrassed to admit their mistake publicly. The other species simply accepted the new charts without questioning where they came from. Captain Okonkwo did not care about recognition. She cared about being right. And now she was planning humanity's first expedition to a region of space that the Council called that place we don't go. "Why don't they go there?" Jenkins had asked her. "'Cause it's dangerous. Unstable gravity, uncharted nebulas, possible hostile species. Every expedition the Council has sent has failed. And you want to go there?" Captain Okonkwo smiled. "I want to see what's on the other side." The expedition was approved 3 months later. 12 ships volunteered for the mission, crewed by a mix of humans and curious members of other species who had started to adopt human philosophies. The flagship was, of course, the Hold My Beer, which had been repaired, upgraded, and painted with a new motto that Jenkins had suggested. The motto, visible in 7 different languages across the hull, read, "No, seriously. Watch this." High Chancellor Vixarian watched the expedition launch from his office window. Beside him stood Ambassador Vasquez, who had decided to remain at the Council station as humanity's permanent representative. "Do you think they will succeed?" Vexarian asked. Ambassador Vasquez sipped from her ever-present cup of coffee. "Honestly, I have no idea. Humans are not very good at predicting our own success. We just keep trying things until something works. It seems inefficient. It is. But it's also how we got to the moon, and how we beat the Vrexenar, and how we ended up here, talking to a giant crystal man about the future of the galaxy. Vixterian considered this. Your species is very strange, Ambassador. I know. That's why you like us. The Chancellor's crystal body shifted to a warm, golden color that Ambassador Vasquez had learned meant affection. Yes, he admitted. I suppose it is. The galaxy had changed. The 47 member species of the Council were learning to adapt to their new partners. Draxian warriors were learning about HFYs. Crixel scientists were collaborating with human biologists. Nebulan mathematicians were grudgingly accepting corrections to their calculations. Even the Valorians had decided to forgive the humans for eating their sacred fruit. Mostly because Dr. Park had sent them a recipe for grape jam that they found delicious. Humans spread through.
Council space?
Like a cheerful infection. They asked questions. They made friends. They touched things they were not supposed to touch and apologized afterward. They started businesses, research projects, and at least one interspecies cooking show that became surprisingly popular. They were loud, chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely impossible to ignore. And slowly, gradually, the galaxy began to realize something important. They had been watching Earth for 800 years, waiting for humans to become civilized enough to contact. They had assumed that humans needed to reach a certain level of technology, a certain level of sophistication, before they could join the galactic community, but they had been wrong. Humans did not need to become more like the Council. The Council needed to become a little more like humans, because sometimes the right answer was not careful planning and calculated risk. Sometimes the right answer was hold my beer. Hold my beer and its fleet vanished into the unknown region of space, carrying human dreams and alien hopes toward whatever waited on the other side. Ambassador Vasquez finished her coffee and went to find more. Hi, Chancellor. Vextherian returned to his duties, already dealing with 17 new cultural exchange requests from species who wanted to learn human customs. And somewhere in the galaxy, Jenkins taught his Draxian battle father how to do a fist bump. The universe would never be the same. That, as it turned out, was exactly the point.